Good morning, and welcome to Virginia Interfaith Live, a weekly broadcast produced by the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. I'm Roberta Oster, the Communications Director. Our program brings you the latest news and resources from experts, faith leaders, community leaders, legislators, and activists. And you'll be able to ask questions live during our broadcast on Facebook and Twitter. During these challenging times dealing with COVID-19, our broadcast focuses on economic, racial, social, and environmental justice issues here in Virginia. We will keep you up to date, and we will keep our elected officials accountable. We will also share opportunities for you to get involved in our work, advancing social justice and helping our neighbors. Today, we have very special guests who will discuss the importance of the U.S. Census and obstacles that we face during COVID-19. I am pleased to welcome our guests and introduce Dora Muhammad, who is the Congregation Engagement Director for the Virginia Interfaith Center.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you for everyone joining us online. Very happy to have with us in the studio today, Alex Bratton, Program Manager at the Virginia Civic Engagement Table, as well as Kelly Thomasson, the Virginia Secretary of the Commonwealth. So everyone knows the census is ongoing this year. April 1st was the date. We have a Virginia Complete Count Commission with about 30 members working hard. But these two women with me here in the studio each have a particular role in making sure that there's a complete and accurate count. So I wanted to ask each of them to talk about sort of what's their priorities in ensuring that every Virginia is counted. Alex, you can go first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Bratton, and I am the Program Manager at the Virginia Civic Engagement Table. The Virginia Civic Engagement Table, also known as VCET, strengthens and connects Virginia's progressive community and acts as a hub so that we can do big things together. We work together as a organization to advance equity, equality, justice, and opportunities, and really just strive to engage underrepresented communities in the democratic process. Part of that process is the 2020 census. In 2018, we recognized that we should begin talking about the importance of the census, especially with all the changes that were going to be happening with this, with the 2020 census. And so we wanted to get the ball rolling, and out of that was birthed the Virginia Counts Coalition. Currently, that coalition has 20 plus partners from a diverse group of organizations, government officials, across different entities. And so we've been working together over the last 2 years to really have a coordinated effort on reaching the most vulnerable people in Virginia who may not be counted without maybe some push or some understanding of what the census is. And so we've all been working together to come up with creative ways to reach historically undercounted communities.
Thank you. And Kelly, can you tell us sort of your role and the role of those in your office?
At the end of 2018, December of 2018, Governor Northam signs an executive order establishing the Virginia Complete Count Commission. And as you referenced, this is a group of really dynamic, amazing people from all over the state of the Commonwealth, from every corner, all geographic regions, from some of the undercounted demographics that Alex talked about, and making sure we had a great crosscut of individuals who could help come together and inform us on strategies that we could better outreach and reach people across the Commonwealth to explain to them why it's so important. I think it's one thing to know about the census. It's another thing to understand the importance of it and to really internalize that and then want to do your part and respond. And that's what's really so important here, is not just making sure that people know about the census, but that they're motivated to actually take that step, take that 10 minutes and respond to the census. So we have been meeting for the last year and a half to come together and do that, to help work with partners like Alex and the Civic Engagement Table and so many great organizations and local governments that are doing work on the ground to make sure that, that people know about the census and that they respond. So I'm proud to have worked with this group for the past, it feels like decades that we've been working on this, but the past year and a half to do just that, to really, how can we reach people? How can we let them know that this is important? It's not just because it's the law. The Constitution mandates that that the U.S. government take account of the population every 10 years, and that's all the census is. And I think that's really important for people to know and to remember. This is a population count. It's nothing else. It is a count of how many people are living in the United States. But that's so important so that we know the diversity and the rich population that we have here, and that we can that everybody gets counted. And it's also an economic issue. And I think that's really important for folks to understand too. The federal government distributes resources and money to states based on their population numbers. So programs like SNAP and Medicaid and school lunches. There's so many programs that are funded based on population numbers. So this is important to every single person in the Commonwealth. Funding that supports you and the resources that you rely on are really so important. And that's why we're spending so much time talking about the census.
So I want to touch on something. Kelly said it takes about 10 minutes. So I'm actually going to issue a challenge while we're on this show. This year is the first time that you can complete the census online, and you'll see the my2020census.gov sliding across your screen. So all those watching us, I challenge you to text 10 contacts right now from your cell phone to remind them to complete the census. And if they haven't, they literally can complete it before we finish this show. So and you should post it on Facebook that you've done that, so that we can sort of see who really is supporting the census while we're watching the show. So I want to kind of talk about COVID. You know, a lot of misinformation out there. COVID has been canceling everything, closing up everything. And earlier in March, the Census Bureau did shut down most of its field operations, and Virginia's offices was closed. They announced that it was going to be, their field operations would resume this week. So just sort of, Kelly, if you can talk about sort of what that's going to look like with the Census Bureau and engagement, especially since we still have to social distance for public health reasons.
Note that the census field operations did pause due to COVID-19. The census never stopped. What's been really fantastic, an upside, if there is one, to this crisis is that, as you mentioned, for the first time ever, the census has been conducted since the 1700s, and for the first time ever, it's possible to submit your census responses online. Back in 2010 and in 2000, you could only wait to get that paper questionnaire in the mail, fill that out and mail it back to the census. For the first time, you can complete it online. You see that address scrolling at the bottom of the screen, my2020census.gov, or you can also do it by phone. For those who might not have access to the internet or not feel comfortable submitting your responses that way, or you want some language assistance, you can call 844-330-2020, and you can complete it by phone. That's been fantastic in the age of COVID-19. You don't have to talk to anybody. You don't have to leave your house. You don't have to touch any papers. You only have to participate from your own phone that you're already on, or your laptop, and take 10 minutes to fill out that response. But as you said, the census does rely on field operations. And this is, I think a lot of folks are probably familiar with this, that the census sends field operators, sometimes they call them enumerators, to go door to door. And that's what the census calls non-response follow-up. These are the people who haven't already self-reported. So if you haven't gone online, you haven't called, you haven't mailed that census form back, usually by now the census would have started sending employees to your house, so very friendly people from your community to knock on the door to say, hey, we understand you haven't filled out your census form. Can we help you do that right now? That, of course, has been delayed due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. The Census Bureau will plan to resume those activities right now. That will start in August. But as you mentioned, they have resumed some field activities now. So starting earlier this week in some parts of the state, we will see some census workers going out in the community and going door to door. What those people will be doing are leaving census forms at households that don't normally receive mail by the Postal Service. So by now, everybody who hasn't filled out their census should have gotten a letter in the mail with that census form that they can fill out. If you got the letter, you can still go online, but if you prefer, you can fill out that form by mail and mail it back. But if you live in a house where you haven't received that, census workers starting this week will be going door to door. This is primarily in Southwest Virginia and in the Valley. They'll be visiting over 34,000 households that haven't received that mail from the Postal Service, and they're only going to be leaving it at their doorsteps. They're not knocking, they're not engaging with the constituents who live there. They're only leaving that. They've got their hand sanitizer, they're wearing their masks, they've got gloves, and they're leaving that paper information for folks to have that opportunity to fill out. Those offices will also be resuming their activities and hiring those enumerators that we talked about. So for those of you who were hoping to get some part-time work with the census, there's still opportunities for that, and they have opened those offices back up and are working on hiring the people who will help go to door in the fall for people who haven't yet filled it out.
So real quickly, as a quick follow-up before I pivot to Alex, when is the last date that people can either submit their paper form or complete it self-responding online? What is the new deadline?
Absolutely. That's October 31st. So although the deadline is October 31st, that doesn't mean you should wait that long. Do it today. You'll make all of our jobs so much easier. You won't have to hear us keep talking about the census if you just go online and do it today. But the census has extended that till October 31st. So you'll keep hearing us talk about the census. You only need to do it once, but please, please, please do it today. But as you continue to encourage your friends and your networks and all of those who are at risk of being undercounted, they do have until October 31st to do that.
Very good. And so in keeping that in mind, I know traditional ways of encouraging people to complete the census have also been halted because of the stay-at-home and a lot of events have been canceled. Traditionally, we table at events and hand out literature, speak at events. Alex, tell me sort of how has the members of the Virginia Counts Coalition shifted their outreach to actually reach the hard-to-count communities that we talked about earlier?
Thanks, Dora. That's a great question. Our coalition has been awesome at pivoting quickly with the news and the heaviness of what COVID-19 has done to our communities. The traditional field programs that we typically see are canvassing programs, right? Like we know as advocates and as civic engagement people that door-to-door contact or face-to-face contact is what works the best to get people to move to action. However, with COVID-19, that's not the safest way to do that, right? And so we switched up our plan and created a universe where our partners were able to coordinate their efforts to make phone calls, texts. We beefed up our digital outreach program, and then we also created this distance postcard program where we sent friendly reminders with all the ways that people can fill out the census. And we just mailed them postcards, let them know a really strong reason as to why it's important to be counted, and then gave them the tools to fill out the census. So the website, the phone number, and also letting them know that, you know, the third mailing would have a paper copy in the mail as well. With that, we have reached over 300,000 Virginians in a short period of time. And I'm so proud of the coalition of partners who have had the capacity and just just everything, right? To be able to make those phone calls, send those texts, all of the above to reach as many people as possible. And it's been a collective effort and super proud of that work.
Yes, I'm very proud to say Virginia Interfaith Center is part of the coalition. So I'm very, very, very much in awe of the coordination and the collaboration that the coalition brings to this work. I will say that as of yesterday, 65% of Virginia households have completed the census, which is above the national rate of 60%. So we're doing a good job. We have more work to do. Can you tell me about that? You have this unique mapping tool on the website, VSET's website. Tell us about that and sort of what data you're able to pull from that to sort of help us get to 100%.
Sure. So on our website, we have embedded the CUNY Hard to Count map. It's Census Hard to Count Maps 2020.us. And we have embedded the Virginia map. And so on that, you can see as a state where we are, but you can also break it down by the locality. So if you live in Richmond, you can see exactly how many people or the percentage of people who have filled out the census in your city. This is super helpful because this is information that can be used to target areas that may need some more help, you know? Maybe they need some reminders, or maybe they, there's so many reasons why people haven't filled out the census. And so this map is a tool for everyone to use to see where your community is at. We know that the census brings so many resources, the data that's derived from the census, so many resources to our communities. And we want to make sure that we are, one, aware of what our community is at. Like, if we're only at 50%, right, we've got some work to do as a community. And so this map is a helpful tool to be able to figure out what it is that your community needs in order to boost those numbers up, because we are really trying to get, in 2010, Virginia's completion rate was 69%. And so we definitely want to be above that this year. And some localities in Virginia have surpassed their 2010 numbers, and that is amazing. But again, there are so many localities that are still working towards their 2010 numbers, and we just want to get there plus some. So check out the map on the engagedva.org website and see where your community is. See what it is that, or see what locations may need some additional resources or help. And then you could reach out to your local complete count committees, because a lot of our local complete count committees are doing some amazing work at reaching the people within their communities. And this is helpful information to continue those efforts.
Very good. And Kelly, have you all within the Office of the Secretary of the Commonwealth, have you all shifted into the digital world anyway in sort of your resources and outreach?
Yeah, absolutely. As Alex mentioned, while I think everybody had a lot of plans for engaging at big events and fairs and festivals and getting the word out, kind of meeting people where they are, that obviously has shifted. We've beefed up our social media. We're on, and if you're looking for ideas or motivation to respond or information to share with your networks, you can follow us on both Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Count on Virginia. And so we've got a great team of folks in our office helping with our social media and putting up some interesting graphics. I know Alex and and VSET are also doing really great work on their social media. So really encourage you all to share, retweet, copy and paste it and put it in your own. We won't be mad if you don't give us credit for it. But really check out that social media and help promote anything that you all can do to help us get the word out and make sure that your community is counted and that you're getting the resources back into your community that you deserve. Is really the message that we're pushing. We've also partnered with Community Connect Labs, which is a service that we are have been doing some outreach via text messaging. And so we both had an opportunity for people to be able to opt in and text in to pledge to be counted. We've also been sending some outbound messages to remind folks to be counted. That tool also has a help desk associated with it. So if you've got questions, if you you've looked at our website and you've checked out our social media, but you've got some specific questions, like you can't remember what the deadline was, or you can't remember the phone number, you can text the word question or pregunta in Spanish to 804-203-0393. 804-203-0393. And you can text question, and then you can text in any questions that you have about the census. And we've got a help desk there that can send answers back. It works great. Again, not just in English, but in Spanish. We've also got some support in Korean, Vietnamese, and Chinese as well. And so if you're looking for those in-language resources and you've got some questions, we've got that resources that's available to help. So we're really excited about that tool as well. And it gives people another opportunity to be able to digitally engage and ask their questions that maybe they'd ask when somebody was coming knocking on their door. And so yeah, it's definitely a tough time, although I think for outreach, but I think everybody's doing a great job. VSET and all of the other organizations that are doing great outreach on the ground digitally now to try to get that word out.
That's so important that you have the multiple languages, because that tends to be, especially with a state like ours that has a large immigrant population, to be a barrier to people completing the census. I do want to shift to a more current barrier, Alex, if you will, just in the light of just recent events dealing with the murders of innocent, unarmed Black men and women. Sort of how do you outreach and cross that barrier to actually convince members of the Black community that there's actually a value in completing the census and being counted when they feel like nationally they're not valued?
Oh, that is a great question. Thank you for that. So I think the biggest thing that I try to think about the history of the census, right? When the census first came about, Black people were only counted as 3/5 of a person, right? Thankfully, that is not the case today, but it definitely makes you think about how it systemically, right, was built to kind of suppress our voice and suppress how many of us were here. And so I think about that today, and I think the biggest thing that I want to push to people who feel like their lives don't matter is our lives do matter, we count. And the one thing that the census does do is it gives a clear depiction of who is here and how many of us are here, right? When we go uncounted, we go without our voices being documented in a way that shows our power as a people. And this is one step that can show that we're not some small group of people who aren't going to push back and fight for equity and better treatment of our people. And it can start with the census. I'm sorry. Like there's so many feelings about.
Thank you for that response. Thank you for that response. It was emotional for me preparing to just even moderate this conversation this morning, like, you know, in the face of what's happening nationally. Kelly, I would love your thoughts on this as well.
Thank you so much. And Alex, thank you. I share those feelings and emotions with you, although I can't the same way that you do. But I think that it's really important. And as Alex said, the census is about showing your power too. And I think we had one of our complete count commissioners who works on civic engagement at JMU had a great article in a higher ed journal. And she had a quote that that still kind of sticks with me. And she said, "Participation is resistance." And I loved that. But I also, I think about this, and I think about people who say, hey, I don't matter, you know, society tells me that I don't matter and that I don't count. And if you're feeling that way, this is the way to prove them wrong, right? Like, be counted, show that you're here and that you're important, and because you are. And I think that is really a message that the census sends, is if you're saying like, hey, it doesn't really matter, or this is the way that society treats me. Well, that's why you need to show them that you're here. We need to show we have such a important diverse population here in Virginia, and we want everybody to count and be represented so that we have a true, accurate reflection of just how diverse Virginia is. I think that's so important in so many different reasons, and so that's why we need everybody to be counted. Every single person matters. Every single person needs to be counted, whether you're 2 years old or 92 years old, or you've just immigrated here, or you've been here for forever. You and your family need to be counted.
That's very important, because you touch upon another very important population demographic that's really important to us here at Virginia Interfaith, and me personally, and that is our undocumented residents. And there's a big misinformation about whether or not the census is just for citizens. And so can you really speak to that? I know I encounter that mostly a lot, and really letting people know that no, the census counts undocumented residents. Can you speak to the fears over privacy and confidentiality that sort of remains a barrier for residents who are undocumented completing the census? Either one.
Yeah, I think we could probably both jump in on this, but we understand those fears, and I think those are fears that we're hearing not just from the immigrant community, but from a lot of Virginians who are distrustful of the federal government. And so it is important to remind people that the census is confidential, that is the law, that information, that population count, which is really what we're looking for, can't be shared with anybody. Those statistics get shared out, those final numbers of these are how many people are here, but that information about individuals can't be shared with anybody. That both goes for the information that's collected on your census form, as well as, if a census worker comes to your home to help collect that information, they can't share anything either. That information can't be shared with ICE. It can't be shared with HUD. It can't be shared with your landlord. It can't be shared with other neighbors. Nobody can have access to that information. And there are strict penalties of jail time and fines and fees for anybody who violates that confidentiality. And I think that's really important to remember. And so we know, and we've seen, and history has shown us this, unfortunately, that immigrants have had reason to be distrustful of the census in the past. But there are, Congress has taken steps to beef up that confidentiality and to make sure that the census is safe and secure and confidential, and that information can't be shared with anybody. And I think that's important, not just for the immigrant community in Virginia, but others. I think one of the things, another issue that we hear about and that we see coming from populations where maybe you're living in subsidized housing or other situations where there's a limit on how many people can live in your house, and maybe you to have no more than 40 living in your house, and maybe you've got another family staying with you right now, or your extended family, and you've got 8 or 9 or 10 people staying in that house. Everybody in your household needs to be counted on the census, and again, that can't be shared with anybody. So don't count the people who are supposed to be living in your house. Count the people who are living in your house, even if it's like, your friend from school who's staying on your couch for a month, or you're staying at your grandma's house in the basement for the next couple of months while you figure out a job. You need to be counted in that household's on that household census form, no matter what, so we can really make sure we know about everybody living in that community.
Alex, did you want to add anything?
I will plus one everything Kelly just said. I think one thing to note is that the private information that is collected from the census, it is not published until 72 years after collection. And so that is done purposefully to ensure that the data is secret and safe, and people can fill out the information with the correct information without feeling like they have to hide anything. And so to that point, that all the things that Kelly mentioned, this information is not shared out publicly until 72 years after the collection date. So we won't see 2020 census data publicly until 2092. So that's a long time from now. So just think about that when you're filling out your census.
And I would like to just also point people to the Census Bureau's main website, 2020census.gov. They have tons of pages with resources, a lot of information, fact sheets. There's particular a page that deals with a lot of the hoaxes and scams. So just in terms of protecting yourself and knowing who is truly a census worker, the census is not going to ask you your social security number. You do not have to provide ID to receive your paper ballot, to submit your form. So there's a lot of protections written into sort of the process of completing the census, but definitely visit that page, that website, and look at all of the resources that's available. Before we go, sort of want to just ask you all this, any other things that you all kind of just want to close out with anyone who, I don't know how, but after hearing this conversation, still has doubts about the value of completing the census? What do you say to really remove that final barrier of doubt and hesitation? Kelly, you can go first, and then Alex, you can.
Sure. This is really not just about today, but about shaping the future for the next 10 years. And the next census is going to be in 2030, and we need to make sure that everybody is counted so that we are shaping those strategies. We know that it sounds intimidating. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully we reminded you that it's just 10 minutes. It might even be less. I think mine probably took 5 minutes or less to complete. So it depends on how many people in your house, but it really is so quick and easy, and it's so important, not just for today, but about the next 10 years, making sure that your community and that you and your family have the resources that you need to thrive. And so really just making sure that this is not because the government's telling you to do it, but it's about really making sure that you're impacting your life and helping make it better for the next decade.
And I would just add that, make sure your voice is heard. Make sure that people know that you are here and you are a force to be reckoned with, right? We know that the census brings resources to our community. We want to make sure that our communities are seeing those resources, that they're not being reallocated to other areas and other states because we didn't get that complete count here in Virginia. It's about, like Kelly said, it's about our future. It's about our children's future. This is going to follow us for the next decade. And so your children who may have just been born, they will be in school by the time the next census rolls around. And that means that the resources that would go to building schools and school lunches and all of the things that come from the census data, like those resources follow us for the next 10 years. And so it's really important to make sure that our mark is in history. Our name in our family is documented. It is important that we have an accurate representation across the state so that we can see how redistricting should be done and where lines should be drawn for representation at the congressional level, but also at the state level. And so all of these things go into the census data that we are trying to get this year. And so we want to make sure that our voices are heard. And this also translates into our voices being, our representation being heard as well. So just want to make sure that everybody make sure that you fill out your census. And if you have any questions or need assistance, please feel free to reach out to, I'm sure, any of us here. So, and we would be more than happy to guide you in the right direction.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It has been a very, very fruitful and informative conversation. Thank you, ladies, for your time. Before we go, I do want to do a little plug for our Civic Summer 2020 that Virginia Interfaith is doing. We're kicking it off June 15th. It's a 10-week program that focuses on voter education, voter registration, getting out the vote, but also the 2020 census. And so if you are looking to have a purpose to your summer while you're still sheltering at home, have time, we have volunteer slots, we have intern slots, and we're looking for a few regional captains still. So visit the URL that you see there, tinyurl.com/Civic Summer to submit your application, and we will definitely look forward to engaging with you around the 2020 census. Thank you all, and as always, as I say, stay informed, stay inspired, and stay connected. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.